Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's session of Business as Usual. I'm Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and with me today is Jonathan Kirsting, as always, co-host and Vice President of Visibility. So very thrilled to have yet another call, and I'm very excited about today's guest. So I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, which are Huntington Bank. Without their strong support, we would not be able to do this every single day. And they have been amazing in terms of the federal loans that have been given out through the CARES Act. And they are the #1 in SBA lenders in Southwestern Pennsylvania. I also want to give a shout out to the team at AT&T for their support for our public policy series, and more importantly, for the support they provide the broader community. They announced $5.5 million donation to Feeding America, as well as $10,000 to support 412 Food Rescue and work for the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank. So just a quick programming note, at the end of today, we're actually going to do a virtual happy hour. We hired Josh James to provide some live music. And for our members, starting at 4:30, if you're interested, and I hope to see you there, we're providing a registration link on our website, and a team member will post it in the chat. So great for this afternoon. Okay, so then tomorrow, by the way, we'll be hosting Leslie Davis. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for UPMC Health Services. And then Friday, a special 1-hour edition. We're hosting Dr. Rachel Levine, Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and Dennis Davin. He is the Secretary of the Department of Economic Development. And then at 12:30, we have Senator Bob Casey. So we are packed and we are thrilled. And I just want to jump to a couple of things. Our technology, just so you know, we put you all on mute. And that's just to avoid any background sound that I know all of us have. And then we also have interactivity that's actually on your chat at the bottom of the screen. And say who you are, you know, you name your company and ask your question in there. It is not for advertising. It is merely to have a conversation today with our state reps who have so graciously joined us today. So I am going to quickly just bring on today's guest. First, we are joined by Representative Jake Wheatley. He represents the 19th Legislative District, and Representative Austin Davis from the 35th Legislative District. So thank you both so much for being with us. I know you both are working tirelessly with you're going full steam ahead, as I would expect from the both of you. And I want to let's lay it up for a question here. So both of you, neither of you are strangers to the people on this call, but can you each just take, a minute or two to describe your districts, the communities that you represent? And I'm going to start with Representative Wheatley.
Thank you, Audrey, and thank you for having us today. Thank you, Jonathan, for being a part of this. My district, I represent the 19th Legislative District, which include the central core of the city of Pittsburgh. I like to say that I have the district that is the most critical for the survival of this region. I have downtown Pittsburgh. I have those areas in the south side that people typically go to visit. I have the hilltop communities of Allentown, Beltsuver, Knoxville, parts of Mount Washington. I have the historic neighborhoods of Hill District, Manchester. I stretch all the way over to Brighton Heights. So I cross all 3 rivers. I have parts of Oakland, South Oakland, and West Oakland. So essentially, the business interests of the area comes through my district, and the social issues of the area comes through my district. And so it's been a very great 17 and a half years of representing and learning more and more about how this region is running and going to continue to grow.
That's amazing. I can't believe it's been that long. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We're lucky to have you. So now let's go to Representative Davis. I know he is here. And,
yes.
Talk about your district.
So, well, first, thank you, Audrey and the Pittsburgh Tech Council for having us today. And thank you to my friend and colleague, Representative Wheatley, for sharing this platform with me today. I represent the 35th Legislative District, which is the communities of McKeesport, Duquesne, Clairton, Munhall, Whitaker, White Oak, pieces of West Mifflin, Versaillesboro, Lincolnboro, and South Versailles Township. So my district is really the heart of the Mon Valley. So basically everything from the high level bridge up on the hill all the way down to Clareton and jumps over into the Seaport. So I have a pretty large geographical territory.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you both have seen a lot. So I'm going to jump back to Representative Wheatley, and then we'll get right back to you.
Mhm.
So in the midst of this crisis, you have focused on an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and that's information and data.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the work? You've been doing a lot of different work, so I don't be de minimis all that you're doing, but can you talk about the work that you've been doing to help ensure that we're collecting and disseminating important data points as it relates to COVID and the outbreak, and then talk about why that's critical?
Yeah, I think we were very struck by the fact that we were understanding that we thought we were understanding that all of the demographic information that typically happens during crises like this were being collected and shared. But what we discovered is it was not consistently being shared the same way, especially the racial data. And if we're going to really stay in front and get in front and not be reactive, but be proactive, we are learning from other parts of the country that those communities that were hard pressed before the pandemic are ones that are now taking the brunt of the infection and in many cases, the severity of this pandemic. And so we wanted to make sure that as a Commonwealth, we are collecting, staying in front of that, and that we are using our resources better to be proactively in front of this and supporting not only the stopping of this, the spreading of this virus, but to make sure those communities have the economic and other resources necessary to get through and to thrive after it's over.
So how are we getting that data now? What are some points of clarity, and is there anything that you can share with us?
So the Secretary Levine has issued a directive to all of the healthcare community. I think most of Philly and Allegheny County, I think we're already kind of gathering and sharing it. I think now they're being more intentional about doing it throughout the Commonwealth. We want to use that data in real time. So we've been working with partners here in Allegheny County to try to address some of the issues that we're noticing. Part of it is the lack of testing, which is an issue for all of us, but it's really a critical issue for these communities that had comorbidities before, and now they are most likely to be the ones that are under reported in a lot of ways. So we're trying to use this information to try to help us with our strategy. So as we are trying to stay in front of this, we actually want to reallocate resources to those areas that we think are most needed to help us to address this. And that's not just from a health perspective, it's also from a business perspective too, because again, understanding where most of this is happening at, it's also going to drive, we think it should drive our resources to try to stabilize those communities and grow those communities. So when we come out of this, that no one is left behind. Yeah,
the comorbidity issues are really quite profound, and they go underreported or not reported. So my hat's off to you for trying to dig deep into that so that we can be transparent. Because you represent almost every aspect of the socioeconomic piece of our community.
Yeah, it's a wonderful district, but it's a challenging one because we have almost equal number of high wealth areas as we have as low wealth areas, and trying to balance the needs, and there are differences in the way of how we approach it. But this district is really a district that has a great balance between that economic spectrum.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that. What about Representative Davis? You know, during the past week, the Department of Health out of Pennsylvania started to release much more granular levels of data, which is bringing an important issue to focus. And that's the plight of the frontline workers. In particular, we've seen nearly 70% of all COVID deaths in Allegheny County occurring within nursing home settings. And this is addressing to Representative Davis. So you have been working to help direct compensation and equipment towards frontline workers who are essential to combating the virus. So can you talk about your legislation, talk about what you found, talk about why it's so important?
Yeah, so I introduced House Bill 2411 which would provide, which would direct the state to invest in massive amounts of personal protective equipment for particularly healthcare workers and janitorial staff in those facilities. Because one of the things that we realized almost from the beginning is how unprepared we were from a supply chain standpoint to provide those type of protections to our frontline workers. In some cases, we have seen frontline workers wearing garbage bags or whatever they could find to protect themselves. And I firmly believe in the greatest country in the world, we should be able to provide those necessary resources to the people who are literally saving the lives of thousands of our citizens. The second piece of my legislation is providing mental health supports for frontline workers, because we know it's a traumatic experience. We've never gone through a public health pandemic like this before. We know frontline workers are concerned not only for the patients that they're treating, but are they going to infect those that they love when they come home? And thirdly, my piece of legislation would create a child care grant subsidy program for childcare or for frontline workers, because as we know, as they leave their children to take care of our loved ones who are suffering, they need a little bit of help in making sure that their children are safe and secure, and they're not having to worry about how that's going to be paid for. We have seen, quite frankly, that frontline workers are literally the heroes of this pandemic, and that's not just healthcare workers, but grocery store workers, but bus drivers, people who are dedicated to serving the public and who don't have the luxury of just staying home. They have responded to the call. So I think to Representative Wheatley's point about the data, we've learned a lot about our social safety nets and the fabric of our society that I think are going to last long after this pandemic has receded. And there are significant challenges that government leaders like us have to address in order to make sure we're prepared going forward.
Can you talk about a few of those?
Well, so one of the biggest things is the divide between communities in terms of digital and access to internet and computer resources. In my district alone, I represent the McKeesport School District, Clairton School District, and Still Valley School District, which are some of the most struggling school districts, and Duquesne for that matter, some of the most struggling school districts in our Commonwealth. And it was very clear from the beginning when we started talking about continuity of education, how we transferred to a remote learning model, that those schools were just woefully under-equipped to begin to deal with that. I think we need to make sure that we're making investments to ensure that in the year 2020, that every child has the access to a laptop, a computer, has access to internet at home. The governor made a big push in this under his Restore plan last year to make sure that everybody had access to internet. That's one thing, but we knew before this pandemic that there were communities that were, quite frankly, being left behind in terms of healthcare access. We're seeing that play out even worse in this pandemic in terms of what my colleague alluded to in testing, but also treatment. I've heard from a number of people who are like, I'm not feeling well, but I don't know if I want to go to the hospital because of the bill that will come. And folks should not have to be making that choice whenever they're faced with their health.
Okay, those are great examples. Jonathan, do we have any questions out there before I jump to Representative Wheatley?
If I can, while he's looking for questions, just to on the issue that Austin brought up, the fact of the matter is we also have a bill to try to make sure our essential employees make sure that they also are compensated, not only get the equipment they need, but also get the pay that they deserve in this time to make sure that they're able to take care of themselves. And we also are pushing this packet to make sure those who don't have the money for the healthcare, the testing, and the fear, take that out of the process. by putting resources in for the uncompensated care fund so we can make sure the hospitals and our healthcare facilities aren't pushing people away, or people aren't fearful to go get the type of treatment and health care that they need. So we want to make sure that we are covering all those bases that Austin brought up.
That's actually legislation that you introduced to help stabilize Pennsylvania's hospitals, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we believe, and I know you're going to your question. We just believe that there is a state response that we need to have, in addition to what the governor is doing right now to try to get us past the pandemic part. We need to be thinking about the relief, but we also need to be thinking about the recovery part, and that's going to require us to have packages and resources made available right away, not later, but right away to stabilize our economy.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for your leadership, Jonathan.
Yeah, we've got some great questions here. First off, Representative Wheatley and Representative Davis, thank you so much for taking the time today. We really appreciate your leadership and insight today. Very valuable. I have kind of two related questions here that you can probably, you can kind of kill two birds with one stone here. So first off, is anyone looking into antibody testing for the nursing home workers? And then also someone has commented that Maryland was able to secure about $500K in testing materials themselves. Are there any plans in the works to do something like that in Pennsylvania?
So just from my standpoint, we have weekly calls with the Secretary of Health, Dr. Levine. I believe her department is working in that direction, and we're blessed as a region. And I believe the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, as well as UPMC and Highmark, are working with state government to ramp up testing. Just yesterday, we saw UPMC has announced they're going to test every person that comes into their facility, as well as their employees. So I think we are working towards that. But I think that would be a great question for Secretary Levine when she appears on this program.
Okay, on Friday. That's excellent.
Very cool.
So I want to ask another question. So many entrepreneurs face months or years with no income from their startup ventures, and all kinds of entrepreneurs. It's not just tech. So to help stay afloat, they're often working in the gig economy, jobs as designers, developers, Uber drivers, rideshare drivers, Lyft drivers. Traditionally, the nation's unemployment system has not been really set up to help those workers and support them. Can you talk about your recent efforts to help this gig economy, but also to help speed the delivery of unemployment benefits to all impacted workers?
Jake, if you want to take it, but this has been an issue that I've really been kind of harping on in the last couple of weeks. Our unemployment system right now, in my opinion, is failing Pennsylvanians. We have seen and I understand that the system is completely overwhelmed, dealing with more people than they've ever had to deal with. But the rollout last week of the new PUA system that would benefit self-employed and gig workers that they'd apply for has been challenging. I've had constant communication with the Department of Labor and Industry about addressing some of the concerns and trying to be as aggressive as possible in terms of the legislature stepping up and doing everything that we can to support this department. Unfortunately, I just actually got word back from the Republican chairman, the majority chairman of the Labor and Industry Committee. Unfortunately, I don't think they're taking this as seriously as they should. The problems within the system, they've basically said, the governor should put everybody back to work, and then that would fix the system. I don't think we should say you should go out and risk your health in order to get a benefit that is promised to you that the government has funded. We just need to make sure that it's rolling out appropriately. But I know my Representative Wheatley and a number of my colleagues have been really engaged with L&I and trying to get through some of these problems with the website, with the system. It has been very challenging.
Okay, Representative Wheatley.
Yeah, I wanted to just say this. First of all, I want to take the time, because we don't do this often, but I want to say to our federal colleagues, I applaud them. I mean, think about what has happened over the last 6 weeks or so. Yeah. We've put almost, with what they're going to do this week, we're going to put almost $3 trillion back into the economy in 6 weeks. Of course, when you're doing something so massive, in such a short time. It doesn't condone, it doesn't release the fact that our system should have already been prepared for this. But part of this question, we had to create a whole new platform and process for a group of people who traditionally wouldn't be available, who would not be able to access our unemployment compensation. And I have to say to the department employees at the Department of Labor and Industry, they did an amazing job. And yes, there are some failures to the system, but I think we need to take our head off and give them some positive just due for what they did. Now, in saying that, I also think, and this is why I keep saying, we do have an obligation. We have a complete packet, an economic package that we think supports small business owners, those who are in these gig economies, those who are in tech, those who are in our communities who are trying to make it through the next several months. We believe that we should go out and bond $10 billion worth of support for these companies, and in different ways support their abilities to not only get through, but to be able to come out of this at least where they were or better positioned to be better. And that's where I think the General Assembly hasn't taken our role seriously, because we keep waiting on the feds, we keep waiting on the administration, but we have an obligation to step up, put our resources, put our talents together, and make sure we're not just waiting down the road to help these businesses.
That's great. So Jonathan, there's a bunch of questions you want to.
Yes, they are rolling in. Let's start with first off, what type of support are you? Let me see here. What type of support are you able to offer minority and small business owners during this crisis?
So we are hopeful that this new packet from the federal government will provide, from what we're hearing, a pot of money that will hopefully cover them. At $60 billion. It doesn't cover all of the need, but we think it will be a better opportunity for them to get in versus trying to get into the pot that they had the other time, the last pot. But we, in part of my package, also carves out $1 billion of the bond packet. It carves out for specific MBE, WBs, and disadvantaged businesses to ascertain, and if we do it, we push it out through the level of the size of the company. So if you are a company from zero, and by the way, we have a package for sole proprietors too. So if you're a sole proprietor and a minority-owned business, you can go after both pots of money, but you can't be given your full amount from both pots. So, for example, if you were looking for $200,000 to get you through, and then one pot gave you $100,000, you could automatically go to the other pot and get the other $100,000 from it. But anyway, long story short, these are low to no interest loans, but they would be some requirement of repay after 6 months. After 6 months, on the 7th month, you can start making payments back. And if you made 18 consecutive good payments after that, then the money that the rest of the money that you had borrowed will convert to a grant. So for these operators, we think this is a better opportunity at the state level. The state did come out with the first round. DCD, when you talk to Secretary Davin, he will talk to you about his first, the PETA loans. I think it was like 61 million. It went in like 4 or 5 days. The need was so much greater, but it was driven out by first come, first serve. We want to drive out these loans differently than just first come, first serve. Right. We think there should be other criteria that says, again, going back to data, going back to the reality on the ground, when you have some businesses that were already hemorrhaging before the pandemic and then you shut them down, then you have to be more intentional about helping them get through and to continue to survive. And what we haven't talked about is this: a lot of these businesses, when you talk about minority-owned businesses, they are sole proprietors. Most of them are sole proprietors, and a lot of them are in the service sector. So they're like hair and nails and bars and restaurants. And guess what's going to happen? They're going to be the last ones to come online whenever we do pieces together, because they normally require more people being in small spaces and next to each other. And so we need to get them through not only long term, we need to get them through the fact that they might be shut down longer than than any other sectors of business. So we think we really do have a packet, and no matter what happens, we're going to be advocating strongly to make sure any money that comes back through the Commonwealth to support businesses has this equity lens in the way that they're going to redistribute the resources.
Good. Thank you for your leadership on that, and thanks for reinforcing that. Jonathan, we probably have time for just one more question, and then I can ask my wrap up.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of tech companies want to be able to pitch in. Not every company can provide, money per se to help out. But what can they do as far as like flexing their muscles and being able to provide skills or services and leadership to be helpful during this pandemic?
So I think the biggest need, and I talked to, that I kind of spoke to earlier, was support for school districts, particularly smaller ones outside the city of Pittsburgh. And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but I think the knowledge that you guys, that your industry possesses in terms of what's best practices, what should their digital departments look like, I think that could be wildly beneficial to smaller school districts like Clairton, like Steel Valley, like Duquesne, in terms of just technical guidance and support in that way. I know that would go a long way, because most of the time, these smaller places usually only have one to two people on their IT staff, if that, to deal with these massive issues. So I think just being a resource for groups like that, I think would go a long way.
We will definitely connect you as the opportunity arises, because I know we got some super smart people and they would love to be able to help you solve whatever problems you guys need.
We will make sure that everyone has direct access to both of you. So the best way to get a hold of you, et cetera, we'll do that. We also have anyone who's asked a question and we haven't had a chance to answer that, we will forward that to both representatives and see if we can get answers to those questions and post them on our website. My hats go off to both of you. My hat goes off to both of you in terms of representing such a wide piece of our constituency that's really important for all of us to wrap our support around. So we don't mean that in some empty fashion. People want to help. People want to help. And even the tech community has been hit as well. And it's, we're all equally. I mean, if you're working in healthcare, IT, perhaps, if you're working in some predictive analytics or anything related to hospitals, you're probably really busy. But across the ecosystem of tech, we're all wrestling. We're all wrestling with what tomorrow brings. And we have to help you. We have to help the both of you as well. So on that note, I thank you both for your leadership and for being accessible to us and just being there. We're your partner and we care what you're doing. So we can't do it alone. So on that note, thank you both for taking the time. I know that you're working, round the clock, so really appreciate it. Definitely. And we'll stay in touch. We'll stay in touch with you.
Thank you.
We'll definitely stay in touch with you. And so as we close, I just want to give a big thanks to Huntington Bank and AT&T, as well as this afternoon, we have a happy hour at 4:30. So how about joining us? And then tomorrow we have Leslie Davis from UPMC. So thanks from all of us at the Tech Council. And again, thanks to our representatives who joined us here today. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone.